And I think we are good to go. I like to start on time if everybody is in agreement with that. And I'll just try to monitor if other folks are trying to join us. I'm also not really good at multitasking, so when things are going on in the chat, I tend to not notice it, but I eventually take a look at it. So I want to welcome you. I want to thank you for being here. I want to check in and make sure everybody is okay. I think it's been super challenging to be a teacher these past few years, and I think even more challenging to try and do professional development during this pandemic. So I'm very happy to see you here. I'm also extraordinarily Zoom fatigued, as I'm sure many of you are. I think it's great we can do these kinds of things from anywhere, but I also think it's exhausting to do these things from anywhere. So I don't have an hour-long presentation for this breakout session. Yeah, I have a very small set of slides to show you something that that I came up with recently that I want to share with fellow STEM teachers. You don't have to be a STEM teacher to be in here, but I'm hoping some of you are STEM teachers. Maybe you can let me know in the chat if you're what your discipline is. A lot of what I've been learning about these past couple of years about different ways of assessments didn't really sit with me as a STEM teacher, so I had to kind of figure out on my own what I thought might work. So I wanted to share something that I'm doing, and it's very new. I've been doing this only since the pandemic, so it's a work in progress. I hope that after I share my process that we can have a little bit of a discussion about what could work better if you've tried something, those kinds of things. So if I were doing this in real life, it would be more of a workshop kind of situation. And I want you to also think about a time when you were a student and you had a really bad day and a really bad grade on an assessment, and how that put you, where that put your mind for the rest of your term, your quarter, or your semester, how that might have impacted you. And that's kind of the motivation for this this thing I'm calling competency-based grading. I'm not even sure if I have the right terms, but anyway, so I'd like to go ahead and get us started. So I'm going to attempt a few little buttons here. And again, I'm not paying attention to the chat at this point. It's just not something I can do. I'm very bad at multitasking. So I'm going to share my screen. Again, I just have a few slides. Nothing crazy. Okay, so and all those of us I think we're probably all in Eric's talk just now. Really fantastic to listen to him. I could listen to him all day. A lot of things that he was presenting really resonated with me. And in the past couple of years, I've been really reading a lot of these ideas behind, labor-based contract grading, competency grading, ungrading. In fact, just a couple of days ago, I was at an ungrading webinar, and all these ideas really presented by folks who do other subjects, at least in my experience. I've seen so many other ways that these approaches could work. And I wanted to try something in STEM. And I was really motivated, to be honest, to do something when I took a look at my SLOs. And so let me take a side here and tell you about the class I teach. I teach biology 1A at Foothill College. It is a first quarter of a 3-quarter series of biology for biology majors. So, transfer into a bio subject at some point is where most students are going. Chemistry is a prerequisite. So some of you can probably imagine what this class is like. And some of my student learning outcomes have to do with this new competency-based learning thing that I'm doing. So the seed was planted to try to do something by learning about these new assessment techniques, but really it was in the SLO process that this idea came about. So I just wanted to make a pledge or a ploy, or that's not the word I mean. I want to just say how the SLO process has been useful in this particular instance. I know the SLOs can be controversial in some schools. That was part of the chat also during Eric's talk. So 3 of my SLOs have to do with what I like to think about as science as a process, the scientific method, for lack of a better description. And so another instructor who also teaches the class with me, he and I constantly talk about things that we could be doing better. So again, the SLO process in action. And 3 of the SLOs, and I put this together last night and I was like, why are these SLOs in this weird random order? And I think it's because it's alphabetical. But 3 of them have something to do with the process of science. So students can analyze experimental results to draw a conclusion. Students can graph experimental results, and students can pose questions, state hypotheses, and identify variables from any given experiment. Okay, not the best SLOs, I'll be honest, haven't been looked at in a while. I could probably improve on these, but I like the idea of stressing science as a process as part of what I want students to get out of the class. So I think it's a reasonable SLO. Whether these could be rephrased is certainly up to discussion. And so what I started to do is design a way to take all of these assignments that are typically experimental setups, lab report writing, analysis, graphing, all of those things that typically come with the labs, and distill them down into one large, I don't want to say large in terms of points, but one large idea. And so I created this thing that I'm calling Scientific Method Competency. And this piece is actually shared with the students at the beginning of the quarter, although we discuss it throughout the quarter. So it's really wordy. It's in the syllabus, so we can go back to it and reflect on it. And I've changed a lot of it already mid-quarter. But the idea in a nutshell is that I have 4 experiments that come kind of at the first half of the class that are kind of traditional. Students set up an experiment, collect some data, do some analysis, do a report. But I wanted them to not be graded, because what I noticed in the past, if a student either misses it, which happens more during the pandemic, especially since we're back on campus and we have rules about if you're sick, you can't show up. So there's a lot of makeup work. If you miss a day, or if you bomb one of these experiments, it could have detrimental effects on your grade later on. And I just didn't want that to be the case. I wanted them to master, for lack of a better term, the process of science over many opportunities to practice. And one of the conversations I had with my fellow teacher when we started to look at the work as it was being submitted is where students might be struggling. And he said, we're not giving them enough time to practice. We're asking them to just jump in and know how to do this. And I was like, you're right. They need practice time. So the idea is they have 4 labs to practice each component. And I have them broken down into a pre-lab component where some of the questions or assessment tools come in, the data collection component, which is doing the experiment, and then the post-lab write-up component where they're designing what their graphs should look like, creating their graphs, and drawing conclusions. So throughout these sort of 3 different discrete areas, the students are practicing applying the scientific method in a controlled setting. There's 4 labs that sort of work for this particular grade, this particular project. So I've tried to use, for my own ranking, I'm struggling with the language I'm trying to avoid, but when I am reviewing what they've submitted, I have been using a 3, 2, 1, and 0 marking, but it's for me, not for them to see. So I don't want them to see a score. I want them to see words. I want them to say, you're doing well, this is right on. You've mastered this content, for example. I see the word mastered might be needing to be changed, or you're really close, here's where you can improve, or, ooh, we should talk. There's a problem with a lot of the areas, or, hey, you didn't turn in this assignment, let's not make that a habit. So they're getting words back, not points. And just to kind of show you an example, this is a checkoff rubric that they do get. I take the points out when I use the rubric, but the idea is they'll see for each component, this is just the pre-lab rubric I'm looking for. Did they have the variables right? Can they figure out a hypothesis? I don't care what it is. Does it make sense as a hypothesis and a prediction, connecting those two ideas together? What controls do they see that they think should be in the experiment that are important? In addition to sort of clicking on one of these terms, I also give written feedback. If they have an almost, I don't just say almost, I'll say, oh, you switched your variables, or, oh, one variable's right, the other's not. So they do this ahead of time. We talk about it in class. They talk about it in small groups. So there's a lot of collaborative work that goes on. So this is just kind of an example of the paperwork that I use to keep track of the scores. In practice, the students are actively engaging in these processes together. So the students would do a pre-lab ahead of time. I think that's kind of common for most STEM lab class specific experiences. And I've struggled with how to use the pre-labs. I think having them answer a few questions ahead of time and then do a discussion at the beginning of class where they do small group and large group has really helped them understand the big picture of experiments. I kind of like that process. Then they'll do the experiment, and I have them work with a set of criteria to create their own checklist of things that probably should be in a graph. And so this is an example. It's a lot of things, but we design this as a group. We come up with, okay, what do you think needs to be in this graph, and where should it be? I make them do graphs by hand. They hate that at first, but then I explain to them, I really think they can engage with their data differently if they understand what the little numbers mean and how you plot points. And they have told me that this has helped them understand what graphs should include. We look at published graphs to get ideas. So we create this together and then we use it together. So they will grade their own graphs, they'll grade each other's, they'll grade in groups, they'll talk about, oh my gosh, I didn't do this, this doesn't make sense. Or they'll ask me what I think of a certain area, and I'll say, what do you think? Why do you think this way? So there's a lot of conversation that we have while we're doing this in class. So I make one day of lab an actual graphing day. So I've had to sort of tweak the schedule a little bit, but having them do it in class in groups rather than homework, I think is much more useful. And I collect all of this information throughout these 4 labs. And each of the labs is assessed in terms of feedback before they do the next graph or the next lab. So hopefully they're learning from anything they could improve upon. And then at the very end of the, well, I shouldn't say at the end of the quarter, this comes about mid-quarter, I do one last rubric where I really do assign points. So they see this, they know what they're getting points for throughout the 4 assignments. And so they can bomb like 3 of them and still earn most of the points. And these aren't the only points in the class. It's a 30-point assignment out of a 300-point lab. There's a lot of other things they do. So yes, some are quizzes, there is one lab exam, but there's just a lot of other things that contribute to their points. And this piece of it, they have improved so much through the end of the quarter. Everybody's graphs are amazing. Everybody is really understanding the very basic parts of setting up experiments, how variables and controls work in a way that I think is more meaningful than the way I used to do it, which was to grade every single assignment for a certain number of points, which means if you screw up one, you know, that can impact your final grade. So I think this simple assessment plan has really been useful to my students. I think it works really well in the STEM area. I've convinced my other STEM partner or science partner to try this, and he says the first time he tried it, he said, it seems like it's going to be a lot of work for me. And I said, but it's not, because you're not assigning points. Feedback is so easy. It's points that are hard, right? You have to judge, you have to decide what those things are worth. Feedback is easy. And after he tried it one time, he said, oh my God, I'm so convinced. This made it so easy. And the students improved so much that by the time you do assess points, grading is easy when everybody is earning full credit because they've really kind of conquered some of the important ideas. So that's my very simple presentation of what I do. I really want to have a discussion. There's just a nice small group of us in here. So I'd love to hear from others what you've tried, what's worked, what you see are maybe red flags or not great ideas about what I'm doing. I'd love feedback in that area, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd like to just kind of open it up. If you just want to unmute, and you can do this as a kind of like a workshop style. Let me open my chat too in case something came in there.
Yeah, I put it in the chat a couple of slides ago, looking at, so you mentioned that students grading each other, and Canvas has a feature built in that I found very useful, peer grading. And I think I find checklist interesting, and I might think about how some of my assignments can be modified to be, because sometimes I see this where when students are peer grading, I can kind of see in the peer grading that they didn't really look at the assignments that they're grading, but a checklist would really help them see, show what kind of things they should look out for as they are looking at their peers' work.
Right. I found that, so I am doing a in-class class. I did try this the first time with my forced online lab, and I've modified it a little bit. I have found it more helpful to carve out time in class for them to do this as small groups. And we just did this week. The volume in the room and the discussion that they have is really vibrant and I think worthwhile. And I think they pay more attention when they have it as part of their day. So I agree that getting them to really look at it, and I do each assignment a little bit differently. So like the very first graphing and assessment, it's really the graphing they struggle the most with. They almost get their pre-lab ideas, they have chemistry as a prerequisite. And so the idea is, okay, what have they taken from chemistry that they remember? Not content, but really, application wise. And I think controls and variables, they get that pretty early on. But the graphing I've noticed has been a bit more of a struggle for some students. And that's why I wanted to give them time to practice to nail it. And I think that having them demonstrate what they think they know on a first assignment. So I give them no instruction on the first assignment. I say, here's your data, do something with it. And they go, huh? I go, I don't know, what should the graph include? What should it look like? And then the next graphs, we start to break it down. And so what I think that's helping them with is they can see, oh, it's not just plugging numbers into a graphing program. It's what is it that I want to show with this data, and what needs to be included. And if they only show a graph to somebody, does the graph stand alone as a piece of information? So I think that helps a lot to have them carve out that time and to build each assignment gets a little bit bigger. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Marisa. I teach at Los Angeles Trade Tech College. Actually, just to piggyback on that one, choosing the graph before they even make the graph. I mean, that helps. But my question is this. Yeah, the teaching of the scientific method is very challenging, and I always tell them this is probably one of the most important, especially in the non-majors. I teach also the same class that you do, the majors, but also the non-majors. So we also talk about how to improve it, and we agree that to teach the scientific method, we have to continue teaching the method while we're doing the labs. And the early labs in the majors bio are a lot of the chemistry one, where it's really a scientific method. So I guess my question is just a technique. If we actually try to make them work on the same criteria that you were mentioning in all the labs, for example, on the chemistry lab part, et cetera, how are we going to fit it in so it would still fit? Because yeah, I know that would help them, but we only kind of pick it up at the very end when we're grading the lab report. And like, if we had the chance for all those formative assessments to check at what point they're kind of having a problem identifying. By the way, they always get the control, at least in the controlled experiment, they always miss the independent and dependent variable. That's what even the best students always interchange them. So if you could use that method for each and every lab that has an actual experiment, I think they will master it. So how are we gonna do it so that it still fits the schedule and we don't run out of time?
Are you a semester or a quarter school?
Yeah, we're still in a semester.
So I'm a quarter school, so I had a really big challenge. So the couple of things that I've tried. So I can't remember the I'm going to put it into chat. There is a paper that has this acronym LIMITS, less is more in teaching science, that I read ages ago. It's probably been maybe 10 years ago on my former sabbatical. And it really got me thinking about, okay, why are we fire hosing our students with all this information? What can we pare down to the basic, because I feel like this is, well, okay, they had chemistry, but I'm their first biology class officially. That may or may not be true, but officially. And so I always felt like, on the first day I gave them everything they needed to know about the scientific method, and then they were supposed to remember that the rest of the quarter, and that was not working. So I redesigned my schedule. I took out some of the experimental pieces that felt redundant and thought, okay, instead of just having them do, like, for example, as an example, I used to have an enzyme lab that had 4 different conditions that students were testing: pH, temperature, salt concentration. I can't remember the other one. I don't know how we did that in one day. I still don't remember how that happened. It was really ambitious. And I don't think that the students gain any information by doing all of those that they don't also get by just doing one of them better.
True.
So I redesigned my schedule for the experimental labs. I have observational labs. I have molecular biology labs, which are kind of a different thing. So, for the true experimental labs, I redesigned them so we do the experiment on one day, collecting the data, talking about the pre-lab, discussing it as groups. And then the second day, so I have a 2-day lab, we do all the analysis in class together, no homework.
Right.
And I think because that narrowed the focus, that helped take away some of the unnecessary ancillary things that we always thought, oh, they have to know how temperature works. And no, they don't. They have to understand how to apply data to an analysis.
Yeah.
And then I redesigned my lab handouts. So I don't use a lab manual. I have lab handouts where I have actually written, here is where the variables go. Here is where the controls go. Here is where the hypothesis statement goes. And I talk about it as I give haiku as the example, right? There is a format to haiku. It's a particular kind of poem that has a format to it. let's think of a hypothesis statement as a format, and let's work within that format. Later, you can lose the format and be more, you can get the bigger picture without the format. But I think it's sort of like having training wheels, or having a pathway that they can follow first, and then they can see where, oh, that's where that goes. So I kind of tried to work that in so that they get, so again, it's sort of like targeted practice. They'll design their own experiment about midway through the quarter. So the other thing too is I try to do all this at the beginning, before the middle of the quarter. So the end of the quarter is like genetics and other things where the experiments are very, very different, so that I can catch it early. I don't want the very last thing to be, oh, here's your big lab report and bye. I want it early. So they do these four experiments in the first 6 weeks, which for us is the halfway point. The tricky part as a teacher is you have to have the lab 1 completely feedback and return before they do lab 2. And otherwise the feedback is useless. So even though their grading is, I want to say easier because you're not assigning points, it's the time pressure's there. So I've also built in my observational labs might come in midway. So that gives me time to make sure the feedback is useful and to see where they're struggling. Every class is different, right? Every group of students is different. You'll say, oh, wow, this group of students might have, so for me, it is the controls seem to be the part they struggle with most. So let's talk about the controls more. So I can focus on that in the pre-lab discussion. So I can kind of wing it as we go along. So those are a few things I've done to try and fit it into the term. I really think we can do less, better, and the students will master it because they can focus on it. I really, really believe that. And I've been doing lots of different things for a while, but this is kind of so new. But I'm pretty convinced that most are leaving my class with a better grasp than they were the old way I used to do it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Patrick, hi Patrick.
Hello, Karen.
Buddy at Foothill. What got you going in this direction?
Yeah. I hear a lot of influences. We've been in a lot of professional development together. But if you'd name some things that have been signposts for you or guides, that would help me place this.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. Good question. Thank you for asking. To be honest, I didn't want any student who hadn't quite come into my class already able to do something to be at a disadvantage. So I think an equity lens might have been what really moved me in this direction. All the professional development seminars, talks, readings that I'd been doing about different ways of assessing planted the seed, but really realizing how demoralizing, it's so demoralizing for the very first assignment that a student submits to have like 4 out of 10 points, right? That's just awful.
So true. So true.
And I didn't want them to see that that was a mark of who they could be or how they could progress. So I felt, and I knew later that 6 points that they might have missed on that first assignment really wouldn't impact them, but they don't see that when that's their first grade. What they can see when you give feedback is, and I've even had students tell me, oh, thank you, because they say, do you want me to do this assignment again? And I say, no, I just want you to do better on the next assignment. They're like, oh, thank you. And they do. I think they really appreciate the chance to show that they've improved. I hate when they say, I'm so sorry for screwing this up. Like, I'm like, you don't owe me an apology. You're supposed to screw things up. This is the first time you've been in this class. If you're not screwing things up, why are you here? You should be in another class. So I want them to get the message that this is a safe, good place to practice, and I want them to work together. I love when they argue with each other about how to do a graph. I would never thought that doing a graph could be so fun for them. So I
I might
think that's
invite you to
what,
teach my statistics class. Graphical representations of data is where we start.
yeah.
And I
Yeah.
heard, I didn't catch your name from LA, mention independent and dependent variables. Yeah, let's get those straight. Right? Here's some data, do something with it, and you're teaching my stats class.
Yeah. I think that students, well, I mean, I think we all learn better when we have a little fun doing it. And I do appreciate that my class is the first, it's very introductory, very basic. I try to make sure it's connected in some way. Like I loved when we, got to talk about all the mutations in the spike protein of the coronavirus, because that's exactly what we were talking about in class in an abstract way. But when we can show a paper about pinpointing these mutations and the changes in amino acids and why that affects, the protein's function, and having the student go, oh my gosh, that's so real. So even something as simple as a, measurements lab and calculations of accuracy and things that are really designed to get them practicing with the tools so they can do the rest of the labs well, shows them the value of the process of science. So you can make everything relevant, I think. I had a good question. Have you been able to get, from Callie, other STEM faculty members to adopt this approach? If so, how did you get them on board? So yes, I have. The immediate person I share my class with, so we have a few sections of the same course, which is probably the case in many of your schools. And he and I talk all the time about ways to get our students, doing things differently. What aren't they grasping? What is it that, first we always lament, oh, they can't do this. And then we pivot and say, what are we doing wrong that they can't do this yet? So he was easy to get on board because we have just been practicing new things all the time together. So my hope is that others who might teach, I think you can expand this on things besides just the scientific process. I don't know if in the classes that come after me in biology really use the scientific method in the same way. Maybe they have something else though that they can do. So competency-based, like I don't even know if that's the term I want to use. Something where, they can take a piece of their class and change the way students experience that piece so that they are practicing with it and demonstrating competency in it to move on. And maybe that is different for each class. What is the thing that you hope people gain competency doing? So my department is super open to stuff like this. We talk about different ways. In fact, we just had a chat about what do we do this quarter, being back in person, doing makeup exams, and half of our department said, well, we don't even do exams anyway, so there's no point in a makeup exam. That's not how we assess. So we're kind of open to those ideas. I'm not sure about other departments on campus, but I'm always happy to talk with colleagues about why I do this and why. And the other thing too is I hate, you are STEM majors or STEM teachers. I hate being looked at as the problem people. Like, oh, we're the ones that set up students to fail, and we're the ones that make things super hard, and we have rigor, and what does that even mean? I don't want my students to fail. That's a crazy thing to say about me. And so I really want, the dream crushers, the gatekeepers, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be seen as that person. And I also realize the reality of the fact that students, in my class anyway, it is a transfer class. I asked my students on the first day, 100% of them are transferring. So I have to be realistic in terms of what they might experience when they leave. I want them to have confidence, right? And I think they get confidence when they can see they've improved, when they can see, oh, I haven't like crushed them and prevented them from moving on. They've had some practice. They feel more confident going forward. When they get to their final transfer institution, I hope that confidence carries them through. So those are some of my motivations. Any other, let's see, I'm gonna check chat. Yeah, I totally agree about content and making sure we cover everything we're supposed to, but I think there are really creative ways to do that. I don't think it's easy to solve that problem without a discussion with other people in your department. So I really think having a group discussion about, okay, what do we really, really, really want the students to know? Do they need to know the lac operon, or they just need to know that there are ways that cells control genes, right? What pieces can we thin out in a way so that they're getting more meaningful content coverage and can use the tools that we give them and experiences that we give them to learn more as they progress up the ladder in their education. So I think what we really should be teaching is how to build on what they learn, not giving them so much at the beginning that they can't retain any of it. So any other insights? Does anybody else do something like this, or don't want to do something like this? Is there hesitancy, anything? Hi, Anna.
Hi, Karen. I don't know if you remember me. I used to teach at Foothill part-time, and now I'm at LA City College.
I do.
And I want to thank you for as long as I can remember, you've always been in front of this, like teaching STEM in a different way. And I appreciate that you're still doing it. And I guess one of the things I want to ask, everybody here who's in this meeting is, how would you approach maybe talking to other STEM faculty to try to get them to slowly, because obviously it's not going to be an immediate change, but maybe to start thinking about approaching STEM differently? Because just like everyone was saying in the chat, like, they in some ways, some people actually find it prideful to be dream crushers, like, oh, my class is rigorous. But does anybody have any advice?
I would like to hear from others before I share, but.
So I'll jump in on that one. And this is the reason that I asked you the question, Karen, because my role at my institution is I'm actually the director of academic assessment. And so my job is to try to get people moving in that direction. And I was having a lot of success before the pandemic. And then when the pandemic hit, everybody got forced into this new way of teaching and new way of assessing. And now that we're coming back to being in person, I see the pendulum swinging all the way back. It's like everything that I did for a year and a half kind of went away, because now they're back to, we're so glad that we can do these in-person paper and pencil tests, and we can assess these things the way that we want to, instead of having to do these crazy online things. And so what I'm doing is reminding people of the information that they get from their assessments and how it helped them to become better teachers. And I love what you said about the grading being easier, because particularly for math faculty, which I also teach in the math department, if they can find ways to make grading easier, they're going to be on board with that. And so a lot of what I've done with my faculty is just kind of, at this point, reminding them of the benefits that they saw prior to the pandemic, and to get them thinking about how some of the things that they did during the pandemic actually worked well for them and made their jobs easier. And that approach seems to be helping somewhat. it's an odd thing to me how difficult it can be to convince STEM faculty that just improving student learning is a good reason to adopt a particular pedagogy.
Mhm.
And so I have tended to come at this from the perspective of this is going to be better for you as an instructor,
Mhm.
and then the students get the benefit of that.
Yeah, yeah.
May I add to the Anna? I used to teach at LACC too, but that I am in a college that is heavily on CTE, career technical ed. So our class are kind of like the gatekeepers or the dream crushers of those who want to go nursing. So
Mhm.
we also have our nursing school, and they do appreciate us when we actually move the right quality. So I guess the important thing about us is to actually let the students know a lot of them are clueless on what it takes to get into nursing. So we have to make sure that they know what they're in for. But we also don't want to crush your dreams. We just want to give them the reality, like this is what it will take if you want to succeed and move on. So again, that's not easy, but we want to say, hey, there are other fields there which might suit you better. So I guess that's another thing that we kind of try to do in our field, like when they take my micro class or in the anatomy, like, hey, there are other fields that might suit you. So in a sense, we got to like think about that too while we're teaching. So yeah, just wanted to share that.
I think for us, I think, Anna, starting with other people who are like-minded so that you have a group of people that can be a stronger force than a individual faculty. So I totally agree that there is some weird part of our brains that are like proud that our subject fails people. We have to change that. And I love that Eric is a physics teacher at Harvard. And I liked what he said today about having a moral obligation to, it's not just us. It is, and in the chat today, when he was asking what grades are for, I really feel handcuffed by the CSUs and UCs where my students will be transferring to give a grade. I would love to not give a grade. I would love to write. And I have a small class. Even when I have a big class, it's a small class from the perspective of, a UC or CSU class. I know my students. I teach the whole class. I know them. I know what their struggles have been. I know what they started with and how much they move their own needle. I would love to say things about them that are more relevant in terms of their potential to succeed rather than some letter grade. I had a student yesterday finish an incomplete, and I hated that what I had to give her was the final exam. It's been some time since she was in the class. She had to finish this incomplete, and I'm like, that is not who you are now. You've moved your needle so much from this thing. And so I really want, and I know I'm not held necessarily to having to do exams in a certain way, but I do feel obligated to give exams at this point. I feel very afraid if I do not, what my class would look like from transfer perspective. So I have reduced the weights of exams. I do what Eric was describing today with the Scantron portion, the multiple choice portion of my test. So there's versions of, I have many question types, but there's some multiple choice. And I love when the students work together to answer that a second time and earn credit both ways. And they do that even on the final. So the final is fun. Remember how the finals used to be, this last time you're going to see the students and they're taking this test and they're all, like this, and then they hand in the test and they walk out the door and you're like, I'm never going to see them again. But having them do the final together, it's like, you got, guys, final's over. they're like, really? And I go, yeah, don't you want to leave? No, we're still talking about this question. I love that. So I just feel I don't know, we've had a summit. We've done annual spring quarter summit pre-pandemic. We haven't really had the energy. So Callie, I think it's interesting to pivot from online teaching back to in-class teaching. You're totally right. Online was so difficult, and I'll be honest, I am fried. I'm not an online teacher normally. It's not my thing. I totally get that it's a great option for some students and some teachers and some disciplines and everything. I just don't want to be the one doing it. It's just not me. And so I didn't put the effort into my online class that I should have. I'll be perfectly open here. I'm on a recording saying that. I just had to get through it. And of course, I thought I was going to do it for one quarter. And then it became 4. And so when we pivoted back to in class, I was like, yay, I get to go back to doing things the way I used to do it. And thankfully, I did have things in there that weren't traditional kinds of assessments, but I can see the reason why people pivoted back. It's not healthy, right? We should have thought, what did I learn about this whole pandemic? What did that bring to the surface? None of the issues were new. They brought it to the surface. And what can I do better? So maybe we have a moral obligation, especially now, pandemic, returning back to the pandemic, what really needs to change? Maybe that's the starting point. So we've done a BIOS, we call it a summit. We plan an all-day department event. We've been able to pay our part-timers for attending. And one year we invited the chemistry department to join us because we are locked together. And for many, many years, we weren't even in the same division, under different deans, completely isolated from each other. And I think that helped. I think having, we didn't invite the physics people just because we thought it would be so unwieldy and large of a group. But we probably should have included the physics department too, because those 3 departments, our students, they take all those classes. And because they have some similarities, so Patrick, they obviously take math classes too, but they have some similarities, the lab classes. We were able to discuss things like, where do we bring in scientific literature? Where do we bring in group work? How do we balance content with deeper learning, having, content sort of impeding that? And I thought it was a good conversation, but we didn't continue it. I think we need to try harder. Just waiting for the old guard to retire is probably not a good plan. I do see the newer teachers being trained in a way, either because they were students in a different time frame or because they're going through professional development where these things are bubbling up, being so much more open and willing. So really just keep trying and get yourself a group of like-minded people who are also doing, because sometimes you don't even know what your colleagues are doing, right? You think you're the only one doing these things. You're like, oh, they're going to freak out when they find out I'm not giving a final, or my final's open book, or they'll get over it and hopefully see the value. Oh, we have an amazing dean. So we, an advocate in your however you're organized. So we've always had, I was just counting, I think I've had 6 deans in my career, and we've always had deans who have appreciated the work of adjuncts in a way that they put their money where their mouth is. So I feel really fortunate there. And I know we have money to do this. So the other, I sit on the union, I know we have money. So when people say, I heard from an adjunct who was trying to get some money for something, and I went, oh, no, that's not right. We got funding for that. So unfortunately, not all adjuncts know what's available. So mentoring your adjuncts in your department is probably really an important thing, making sure they know what's going on and how they can be compensated for their involvement, how their involvement is so valuable and so important. You teach so many of our classes. Our students are taught by adjunct. We cannot not include them.
Yeah, you just made me realize that's something that I could like reach out to the professional development committee or to see if we can tap into that funding for something like a biology summit. That'd be cool.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, you know, we've done, most of them are sharing out. Show us the cool thing that you do, and that was just so illuminating. You realize, oh, my faculty are doing so many cool things, and the conversation could be even targeted to assessment. So you say, let's have an assessment summit. That way it's narrowed in focus, and that makes people reflect on what they're doing. If they want to share a cool assessment idea and they don't have a cool assessment idea, that sort of says a lot about, oh, all I give is a midterm and a final. It's like, oh, that's probably not enough. Maybe a good discussion is warranted. So that's helpful, I think. Coming at them from a supportive perspective, not you should be doing this, but hey, this is what I'm doing. I think it's serving our students. Don't we want our STEM students to succeed? Don't we want to show off that instead of crushing them, we've actually sent them on their way and yay, they're going to be successful? I think, God, we'd be so much happier for that. At least I am. I'm not a sick and twisted, let's fail the students and be all, you know. I actually dropped my physics class in college the first time. I obviously had to get through it at some point. And when I dropped it, the physics professor said, because I dropped it with a bunch of other students, so many people dropping my class, I must be doing something right.
Yeah.
And that's not uncommon, I think, for our students.
It's come up a lot today. And actually, I wanted to comment on that because I wanted to commend you, Karen. I heard you say when you were, I don't know how we did all that in one day, right? There were like 4 things you did in one lab, and you chose instead to do one thing well, not 4 things poorly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and mm-hmm. I want to get behind you on that. And there is real benefit to that for students, because if they can do one thing well, they'll see the temperature data and say, oh, I can, this is kind of similar to what okay, that's mm-hmm. not, I can, right? And that to me is the key response to the pressure that we all feel to cover so much content.
Yeah.
It's like, if students are excited about that one thing, if I've got a good question that gets into them, gets their hook, and you see it like that final exam in Eric Mazur's talk, right? If they're working like that, they can handle whatever you throw at.
Yeah.
Now the what's coming up here several times is that we as faculty take pride in stopping that kind of thing from happening.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. And I'm in the math field. We are the worst. We're the best or the worst, right? The most extreme in that view, because, and I've looked into that, we gain a lot of status from being really selective, or we've got the lowest GPA of any department on campus. Every math department at any higher ed will know that, and some take pride in that. Mm-hmm. So it's a cultural shift. You got to talk about identity, because who I am as an instructor, if I'm attached to the idea of being the smartest guys in the room, right, then I'm going to have a real challenge picking up what you're dropping.
Right.
Right. So to bring people on board, I heard that here today, is that we got to think about our own identity and our beliefs about our own role at our own place, and that's going to stir up a lot of stuff.
I was an adjunct at a different college prior to getting my job at Foothill, and I taught a microbiology class. It would be like a pre-nursing microbiology class, and the dean, or was it the department chair? Can't remember. I think it was the department chair, called me at the end of the semester and sort of chewed me out for having too many A's. And
I've heard that critique.
wanted to know, how I was inflating the grades and making it easy. And I thought, well, I give the students opportunities to try again, to do it again. And do you remember, I'm dating myself, and I was also a kid in California when I went to elementary school. So, and I don't know if this was a nationwide or statewide thing. Do you remember those reading cards we had in grade school? They were color coded. I think they were called SRA. You had to read like a page and then answer some questions. And as you move through the colors, they got harder and harder and harder. And you had your own time to work through that. You had your own time to, if it took you 3 weeks, if it took you all year, eventually you got through all those colors. I loved those things. Partly because I loved reading. I think I did them all in 3 days because I was like, give me another one, give me another one. But what I reflect on that now is like, I could read when I was 3. My parents taught me to read early on. That's not the case for everybody. But we all should get to a point where our reading comprehension is such that we can function in other ways in life. I think of science the same way. Why can't science be the same way? It might take some students a while to get those variables right. But once you get the variables right, you're probably not going to get them wrong again. You really do. It's like driving a stick shift. Once you drive one, you're going to remember how to do it. It might take a little practice. So I really think we owe it to our students to give them the practice to master, conquer, however you want to phrase it, some of the fundamentals, give them a confidence, the tools to go on, and not be like, oh, well, you screwed that up on the first day, so go be, something else. Like that's crazy to me. And I think this little piece, so that's the other thing, Anna, maybe getting people to see this doesn't have to be everything you do, right? Like keep your hard final if you want, like just try something. Try something that is more equitable, try something that's more relevant, try something that is, going to build the confidence. Just try something. Don't be a hard ass and keep doing things the same way because you like that. Think about your students first. You'll, I think, be happier than the pride you feel crushing them. I would hope. So on that note, I see we're almost out of time. I really appreciate you being here. I love that we were a nice small group that we could sort of share and talk about, our specific situations. And I look forward to improving my my plan and adding in new things. And I hope I've encouraged you to try some of this yourselves. So keep in touch.
Thank you.
See you at some of the other sessions.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks for sharing all your advice. Bye.
Bye-bye.
It's good seeing you again, Karen.
Yeah, you too, Anna.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.